Prior to last month's military rifle shoot, I jokingly suggested the idea of picking up a new rifle for the shoot. I didn't do that, but oddly enough, on the way home from the shoot, I did pick up another one. So what we have here is a Yugoslavian Mauser, 24-47, one of the refurbs. Came in from Century Arms at some point. It's in nice shape. They did do the old etch-o-matic here for the serial number, and then up here also on the muzzle we've got the import marks. Or I thought there was, maybe there isn't. I could be lying about that. Let's rotate it around and see. I thought it had import marks up here. Yeah, it does. There they are right there. So anyway, I grabbed this Yugo Mauser and figured, you know, maybe I should see if it'll shoot. And if it does, maybe it can go to the July 2022 shoot, which is 2 weeks away. So I thought what I would do is go over what I do with these rifles when I get them. You know, what are the first steps? And you know, this one is a pretty typical 24-47. It's got forced matched parts on the floor plate. The bolt, the receiver have all been reserialized. You know, when they refurbed them from the 24s, you know, they scrubbed all the crests and put all new markings on them and whatnot. And you know, it doesn't look like it's been run a lot since then. It is kind of gooey with cosmoline in some places, but it's been cleaned off better in other places, so it's not too bad. And you know, it does have some cool markings, some overstruck marks on the stock, and you know, you can find different variants of these depending on what Model 24 parts they used, what the receiver originally was, what was kicking around when they redid them. So they're actually a pretty interesting rifle when you start to study about them. Now, this one kind of indicates the date because of the type of the lettering here. They changed at some point, and you can look up all that stuff to get a general idea of when the refurb, re-arsenal, if you will, may have happened. So I don't know all the details on it, but it is a decent rifle that, you know, it's got good finish on the parts from when they redid it. I believe that this one probably was rebarreled. Some of them, you know, kept Model 24 barrels. Some of them were new manufacturer barrels from post-war times. I've not disassembled it. I've not cleaned it. I've not done anything. What I figured I would do with this one is it's in good enough shape. I thought I'd shoot it a little bit before I tore it apart. The only thing I've done is just a little bit of, you know, fooling around with it to make sure everything was operating. So let's just kind of take a look at what I normally do when I get these things going. Alright, well, I've changed the camera angle a little bit here, so what I usually go about first is seeing how brass fits in it. So what I've got laying here is I've got some pieces of previously fired 8mm Mauser. These were pickups, and I've picked 4 pieces of brass here, and I've measured them with a headspace comparator, and they're labeled in the order of their increasing headspace reference dimension 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what I'll do is I'll try chambering them, and we'll see. I didn't write down the numbers of what they are because it's not really important until I find out what fits and what doesn't fit. And if I measured them yesterday and measured them tomorrow, they'd be different than the measurement from today by a half a thousandth, a thousandth maybe. Caliper's probably good within a thousandth, but you know, they vary. So I don't worry about writing the numbers down until I take my measurements. I usually do this with a stripped bolt. And in these Mausers, a lot of times I'll drop the floor plate too. So let's go ahead and slip the bolt out. Well, let's show you how I do this. The bolt is closed. Obviously, that's the safe position. This lets you operate the bolt. This locks it. Typical Mauser wing safety. So if we put it in the up position where it will let you run the bolt, when you pull it out, then you can disassemble the bolt very easily. You just press this little plunger right here. There's a little plunger. You press the plunger and you can twist the cocking piece right off. Sometimes you have to press it twice, other times it'll cam over. That's as far as we really need to strip the bolt. Just take that assembly out, just take the cocking piece and all of that off, and then you're left with the bolt. We'll go ahead and take the floor plate out too, just to make our job easier. And the reason that I take the floor plate out on these Mausers is because it's a controlled feed action, and feeding a piece of brass in it without a bullet is kind of tough unless you put the bullet on the bolt. You can just snap it in under the extractor claw like that, or and then slip it in. If you do that, then the floor plate kind of becomes an issue to putting it in. It just gets in the way. So what I usually do is I go ahead and pop the floor plate out of them too. I use a thin piece of dowel to depress it. Sometimes you can get it to move easily, other times you gotta tap it a little bit. So I hold it down and just, there it is. There's your floor plate out. So now we have access to the bolt from the bottom, and I can put the cartridges up, or the brass up from the bottom. So when you're not cocking the bolt, it runs real easy. You don't have to worry about a plunger ejector on these because it has an ejector box rather than a plunger. Mausers are a little different in that regards. So here's our number 1, the shortest piece of brass. I'll put it in, snap it up under the extractor claw. This one actually has a really strong extractor. Okay, then we'll see if it'll close on that piece. It feels good, it does close on it. So on our note card here, we'll just, I don't know if you'll be able to see me writing on this, but so we'll say on our number 1 it's a go. See if our number 2 will go. Number 2 is also a go. So let's try number 3, which is a little bit longer. Let's get back here. These 24s have a little bit shorter. This one's actually got a really strong extractor. We'll just take it out and we'll slip it out, slip it under the claw here, and that just makes it a little easier. We'll just go this way. Alright, see if number 3 will chamber. Oh, we're starting to get tighter. Okay, so that one's firm. Yep, that's a little tighter than I would normally resize brass. I think it would go, but we'll just call it, we'll call it firm. Just writing it down on a card here which ones will go in and which ones won't. My guess is number 4 is going to be pretty tight. We'll go ahead and do it back this way again. I say you just slip this right under the extractor claw. And that one's a no-go. So that longest piece of brass is a no-go. So I think probably number 2 was probably the closest to where I would normally fit my brass. So let's take some measurements on the brass now and see what we actually had. Let's look at number 4, the no-go, and I'll zero my comparator out here. Okay, so I don't know if I got a good enough camera view here or not, but we'll try it. So right now, today, 1.8925. That's a no-go. Let's take a look at the number 3, see what it was. 1.89 straight up. That one was pretty firm. It probably would have went if I put downward pressure on the bolt, but it felt pretty firm, so I left it. And let's look at number 2 because it felt reasonable. It was firm, but it was. That's 1.888. So if we look at what we have here, the one that would not go is 1.8925, The one that was kind of a bit tight, 1.890, and number 2, 1.888 was the one. So, you know, I think that we could probably say that the headspace reference on this is probably somewhere around 1.89 or so. Feels pretty good. So let's compare that to what a piece of factory brass would be. This is just PPU, which, you know, I buy this stuff when I see it at a reasonable price. This stuff was about 20 bucks a box, if I remember right. Local shop, yeah, $20.99 for the box. And so and the PPU brass is really good too. I like it. So here's a factory cartridge. Let's see what the factory cartridge goes for. And we dropped that one, but that's all right. So if we look at this factory one is 1.885, 1.889, 1.885. Let's do another. So let me write that down for the factory load. 1.885. Put this over here with these other ones we're not using anymore. Let's do one more. I'll just pick one out of the middle of the box here. Now it's telling me 1.87. A bit of a variation if we're still zeroed. .887. So that's a little bit longer. And let's do one more from back in the back of the box here. .888. All right. Well, so if we look at our numbers here in comparison, my number 2 piece, actually my number 1 piece of brass that was fired was 1.888. That's right about in line with this factory stuff, 1.885 to 1.888. So somewhere in that range. So I would say that the headspace on this rifle is just fine. I don't think there's any problems at all. Another thing I do sometimes is I keep these little dots of masking tape around. You know, if you see these on my finger here, I keep these little circles of masking tape around, and a lot of times I'll use these to just kind of verify too. So the rifle's safe to chamber ammo in right now. It doesn't have a firing pin in it. So let's go ahead and put a piece of this factory ammo on the bolt face. And let's see how it chambers. It's going to chamber fine because we know that we're in the ballpark. Oh, it feels great. It's just got some nice resistance to it. And some of that is probably the extractor claw riding in the groove. You may or may not be, you know, it depends on, the friction comes from various places, but it feels pretty good. So let's take and put one of my pieces, trying to get in the camera view here, put one of my pieces of blue tape on there. What I should do before I do this, let's this particular cartridge that I'm playing with, let's go ahead and measure the reference dimension on it. This one is 1.888. So we'll start with the 1.888. We'll put our piece of tape on it. So there's our piece of tape on there. Let's see what that measures on the comparator. That put us at 1.893. If you can see that or not, but it's 1.893. So I'll put +1 is 1.893 in my note here. Let's see if that'll chamber. May not even be able to get it under the extractor. Yep, it long as it didn't wrinkle up, we'll be okay. Alright, so let's see if that chamber, it still will go. It's a little firmer, but it will go. It wrinkled the tape a little bit, but it didn't chew it up too bad. I'll have to cut out some new tape discs. It did smash the tape down quite a bit. But let's go ahead and put another piece on there. I'll where it wrinkled it up a little bit there, I'll take that off of there with a craft knife or a razor blade or something, because where it's wrinkled it'll give us a phony number. There. So let's put another piece of tape on there. Okay, so there's another piece of tape on there. Let's see what that measures on the comparator. That got us up to 1.8965. So that's quite a bit more. Two and a half thousandths or so. 3.5 thousandths. See, I think the hardest part's going to be getting it under the extractor. You start to get the thickness of that. There we go. Yep, that's tight. I don't even think I'd want to cam that down. You might be able to cam it down, but there's no sense in it. So that's 1.8965 is his. I'm going to call that a no-go. Now the tape is somewhat compressible, obviously. So if you wanged it down, you could certainly compress it. You know, and we felt that this longest piece of brass, this 1.8925, was a no-go. So camera shut off on me there. Silly thing. So with my two pieces of tape, my headspace reference dimension was 1.8965, so 1.897, somewhere in that range. We felt that 1.8925 was a no-go on a bare piece of brass. This is firm with the two pieces of tape. Now obviously it'll compress somewhat if I cam it down, but I think that this number here is pretty accurate. So, you know, in reality, this 1.888 piece of factory ammo is within the realms of what we were calling go no-go with our other cartridges that were a little bit longer, or other pieces of brass that were a little bit longer. So I think it's entirely a good chamber. It looks real good to me. Like I said, I have not even cleaned it. Usually I'll clean the rifles and things before I even do any of this, but it looks real good in there. You know, you can see that it was starting to smush down my tape. You know, these Mausers have plenty of camming power where they can stuff a piece of brass in there pretty well. But put my tape back over here. I just keep a few of those discs of tape stuck on my toolbox over there so I can just grab them when I need them. But let's do a couple of pieces here and see how they work. That feels real good. So yeah, I'm confident that this rifle will be plenty safe to shoot. I don't see anything. I've looked over the lugs a little bit. I don't see anything at all here. Now granted, I think a lot of these 2447s, you know, when they were arsenaled after the war, and I think a lot of them were stored and weren't shot much. This one, the bore looks really good, and I haven't looked at it with a bore scope yet, but just looking down it with the bare eye, the bore looks really nice. So I think the rifle's going to do just fine. Let's go ahead and put the floor plate back in. See, sometimes they'll go just by hand, sometimes you gotta, what I do is I usually just kind of lever it with the dowel a little bit here. There, that popped right back in there. Okay. Alright, so let's put a couple rounds in here. And there's 3 in there. And once again, no worries, there's no cocking piece or firing pin here. So that feels great. That feels great too. feels good too. I think we're all set. So I'm confident that this is going to be just fine. So the next step will be to just a general cleanup. I'll put, I don't know, I might shoot some of this factory ammo out of it. I might put some ammo together to try in it and see what shoots out of it. I'm assuming it'll shoot very similar to my Kar 98K. They're virtually identical rifles other than the length of the receiver being a little shorter on these. But yeah, I'm pleased with it. It's a decent looking rifle. I didn't spend a lot of money on it. It has the typical, you know, when they redid them, you know, the 444 is the new number. The 50945 would have been an older number from when it was, you know, when it was before it was worked on or upgraded or arsenaled, whatever you want to call it, when they changed them into the 47. The 444 is there on the floor plate. If we look also on the side of the receiver, there's the remarked 444 there as well. And then on the bolt as well, they force match them at the arsenal when they redo them from what I'm reading. And then this number, I think, on the bottom of the bolt, from what I've read, is an assembly number. So probably inside on the receiver, if I took it out of the stock, it would also probably have that number, which looks like 1721. So, yeah, I think it's going to be fine. It seems like it's a... Let's put the bolt back together. Right to there, straight up, put it in, and there you are. So, I think the next step will be to take a look down the bore, maybe swab that out, see what we've got, make sure the chamber's good and clean. Like I said, I usually do that before I check the headspace and whatnot, but this one looked clean enough. I don't think there's anything in there other than maybe a little bit of oil. I don't know how long it's been since this rifle has been shot, but the bore looks very, very good in it, and I think it's going to shoot just fine. So we'll start on that part next. Thanks everybody for watching.